Hi everyone, Dylan Gowan here. Welcome back to another installment of Overkill Reviews, BangerTV's weekly heavy metal review show. Let's cut to the chase. You guys know I was going to be talking about this album. Love this video, love this band. It's the fourth studio album by Cynic called Ascension Codes, out today through Season of Mist. Cynic are one of the most influential progressive metal bands in the history of the genre. Since the band's formation in 1987, they sought out to do something different within the ever-evolving metal scene. Key members Paul Masvidal and Sean Reinert carved a name for themselves early on in the American metal scene, lending their talents to one of the most influential death metal albums of all time, that being Human by Death. Cynic in the early demo days were kind of keeping into the more traditional death metal style, but were slowly getting influenced by more jazz fusion, progressive rock, and various other electronic and ambient music into their sound. During production of their debut album, the band recruited Sean Malone to round up the lineup. The grueling recording schedule at Morris Sound led to the creation of one of the most beloved progressive albums of all time. It's funny, the first time I was ever on BangerTV was actually on the prog metal influential albums episode, and the first band I ever talked about on this channel was Cynic. Focus by Cynic is an absolute vital to the progression of progressive metal, no pun intended. And I have the magnet here that I found. The moment I was invited to do that episode, I was like, okay, we're talking about Focus by Cynic. It's just one of the most influential, and it's so freaking good. It's literally an amazing album. But it's really weird because when the band released Focus, oddly enough, it was met with mixed reviews. They created a sound that a lot of metal fans at the time were not ready for, leaving their label confused on how to properly promote the band, which led to poor management and them opening for Cannibal Corpse, which was one of the few reasons why the band initially split up. Fast forward several years later, and the band saw a more open-minded metal fan base emerge in the early 2000s, which led the band to reform and give Cynic another chance, which led to their second album, Trace and Error, which was released in the fall of 2008. That year was very important for progressive metal, as many of the biggest bands in that genre releasing albums like Opeth, Gojira, Meshuggah. I mean, we were just a year away from Animals as Leaders and Between the Buried and Me releasing new stuff, as well as Devin Townsend. So Cynic were just at the right place at the right time when progressive metal started to really kind of come back with a vengeance. The success of Trace and Error continued with the EPs Retraced and Carbon-Based Anatomy, as well as their third studio album, Kindly Bent to Free Us. Sean Reinert would eventually leave the group due to creative differences, which led Matt Lynch of Trioscapes to take over. 2020 was a very difficult year for many, and it was especially a very difficult one for Cynic, with the passing of both Sean Reinert and Sean Malone. Season of Mist and Cynic recently released a tribute video for Sean Malone. Suicide is a tragedy that affects many people, and the conversation about mental health is one that needs to be ongoing and discussed further. That's why in this video we're going to include links to the Trevor Project, Kids Help Phone, and to Write Love in Our Arms. If you are unable to talk to somebody about your mental health, I encourage you to reach out to any of these organizations below. Ascension Codes is named in honor of both Reinert and Malone, and there's a lot of anticipation to hear this record that's nearly 7 years in the making. So let's get into it. The moment I got this album, I immediately dropped everything I was doing and listened to this album uninterrupted, which is the perfect way to listen to any Cynic record. But this album is unlike anything I've ever experienced with this band. Ascension Codes takes you on a journey with sudden shifts in style, tone, and mood, while simultaneously tugging at your heartstrings. Each track offers a familiar sound to fans, as each track kind of harkens back to previous musical iterations of the band. There's instances of song like in A Multiverse where Atoms Sing and Elements and Their Inhabitants, which reminded me of the Focus and Trace and Error era of the band. Also, a quick side note, this album is much heavier than Kindly Bent to Free Us. So if you wanted to hear the riffs that sound like they were written in 1993 but were thrown into a modern setting, you won't be disappointed. The codes that are embedded throughout this album act as kind of interludes to set up the next song, which ranges from relaxing and calm and very kind of like, you're almost kind of in the Zen state when you're listening to them. But then eventually you get into some kind of unnerving interstellar communication with aliens kind of vibe thrown in with these codes. And I've been trying to crack them, but it seems like every time I get an answer, I completely second guess myself. It instantly reminds me of being back in school, which I skipped once to go to a Cynic show. My parents were not happy that I did that, but it was totally worth it. The musicianship is as impressive as ever, with each song being cleverly crafted. The guitars are heavy and as shred crazy as ever, but at moments they become very percussive and rhythmic, like within tracks like Mythical Serpents and Diamond Lightbody. Those ideas are often supported with electronic and ethereal layers, which are familiar to Cynic, but this is perfected within Ascension codes. Each song has this wall of sound that is layered with so many different ideas, and at times it can be very chaotic, but their songs always have this consistent pulse that is easy to latch onto. They've managed to strike a perfect balance between their calm and chaotic sides. I think this is an album where a lot of non-prog fans or people who have never picked up an instrument can really find a lot of things to admire about Ascension codes. Even though this album is still fresh in my mind, I will say that the drumming on this album is some of the best and the most creative metal drumming I've ever heard of. What makes Matt Lynch a very strong musician is how he doesn't default to typical metal drumming. The riffs that are presented, which can easily have a thrash, blast beat, or fast double kick part, but instead of him kind of going to the default, he chooses to incorporate more tom, more drum and bass, and traditional jazz ideas, much like what Sean did. What was eerie about this album is that I felt like Lynch really channeled the spirit of Sean through his playing, while simultaneously creating his own footnote within the legacy of Cynic. It was really tough for me to pick a favorite track, but I couldn't help but listen to Aurora over and over again. First off, the riff is really heavy and melodic, and the hypnotic nature of the verses, the sparsity of the toms, and the sudden crescendo into the chorus just hits all the right notes. My interpretation of the lyrics while reading them for this song have to deal with loss and how to move forward with it. One line in particular really stands out. I guess I'll have to face it, open my arms, embrace it. My liberty is patient. I'll step right in and face it, open my heart, embrace it. No walls here to contain it. As previously mentioned, everyone involved with Cynic has gone through sorrow and hardships. This is a very emotional record, and you can hear it especially within Masvidal's voice. You do get the hypnotic and calm vocal delivery, but at moments there's anger, sadness, and frustration. I can't imagine the state he was in while this album was being created. The record does feature some guest appearances by Max Phelps, who used to be in the band and was recruited to lend his guttural vocals back within Cynic. The guest solos that you hear are from guitar virtuoso Pliny, who lends his talents to a couple of tracks on this record. I especially loved the solo that he does in The Winged Ones and delivers just amazing solos. I mean, that guy is just incredible. It's really easy to immerse yourself in this record and to get lost in the music, and that's what makes this album really strong and a must listen for any progressive metal fan. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with the music on this album. The only problem really that I have is me. I have this weird fascination with trying to decode these codes. I felt like a detective going through books on spirituality, Buddhism, looking through old Cynic videos, lighter notes in the album credits, and I can't figure it out. Literally, there's a whole whiteboard at my house where I'm just trying to like connect the dots and being like, I have no idea what they are. If I had to take a shot in the dark, my guess for these Ascension codes is that they are all states of how... Actually, I'm not even gonna try. There's a lot to unpack with this record, and Cynic's whole entire history is a perfect example of why you should go against the grain when it comes to writing a metal album. This might sound as pretentious as any basement-dwelling, pagan LARPing, salty as hell black metal nerd, but the reason why progressive metal thrives is due to bands like Cynic not resorting to similar sounds that work, but are constantly challenging the boundaries that were set by their predecessors. The band had developed and crafted a sound that has been copied and repackaged under another band name countless times. Cynic is still one of the most important bands within metal. Paul Masvidal delivers the best performance of his career. Matt Lynch does an excellent job holding down the drums. Dave McKay does a great job with all the bass synthesizers. The visuals are fantastic. The guest appearances are great. If this is the final album of Cynic's career for good, then this is a perfect send-off, and they leave their mark on being one of the most influential and important bands within metal. This album is a no-brainer, a perfect 5 out of 5. All right, it's time for some shoutouts. Aside from Ascension codes, here's a couple of other albums I'm really looking forward to as well. First up being Black Label Society with their brand new record, Doom Crew Inc., which comes out on Napalm Records. Here's a band I've been also looking forward to for a very long time. That's Hypocrisy with their brand new album, Worship, which comes out on Nuclear Blast. We also have Rhapsody of Fire, Glory of Salvation, which also comes out on Napalm Records. Deep Purple is releasing a covers album called Turning to Crime, which comes out on Ear Music. Opera Diabolicus, Death on a Pale Horse, also comes out on Season of Mist today. And finally, we have In Mourning, The Bleeding Veil, which comes out today on Ognia Records. This is going to be my last progressive metal review this year. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for all of our Patreon donors, everybody who watched Overkill Reviews, or Heavy Metal Hitchhiker, or Overkill Global. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys next year. We'll talk about some more prog albums then.